Thank you everyone for joining. I am so excited. Welcome to our Fireside chat with Libby. I'm Shivani. I am the CEO and founder of Ascend. We offer online leadership programs to help women move into leadership. And prior to founding Ascend, I was on your side of the table. So I owned and led different business and product initiatives. And as I moved into leadership, I learned how to lead and get buy-in by honestly making a lot of mistakes. And then I realized that I wanted to create the leadership programs that I wish I had access to when I was making that transition. And so I founded Ascend, and we've had members from companies like Facebook, LinkedIn, Box, and many more come out of the program just feeling much more confident, able to consistently get buy-in from stakeholders, including dominant personalities, and really grow in their careers. And so much of the content has been curated by successful leaders who have faced these challenges before. Because I really believe that we need to have open and honest conversations around what it takes to move into management. And a big part of that is getting to learn from awesome women leaders who have crushed it and getting to learn what exactly do we need to start thinking about and what do we need to do. And that's why I'm so excited for our conversation today with Libby. She is the regional president and regional president at Compass. She was a former business lead for Sheryl Sandberg at Facebook. And she has been named by Fortune and Marie Claire as the next generation of the most influential women in America. And just overall, just very impressive. Today, we're going to have a great conversation around many of the topics that are at the top of our minds. You can also continue to drop in your questions for Libby. If you see at the bottom right of the Zoom screen, there's a Q&A. You can put questions in there. And you can also upvote questions. And towards the end of the conversation, I'll take some questions from there to ask Libby. Libby, thank you so much for joining us. I'm truly honored to have you, and I'm so excited for this. Libby and I met at Harvard Business School when we were both studying for our MBA. And when I was trying to think of who to have in this fireside chat, she was the first person that came to my mind, because not only is she a very impressive background, but she is someone that when you meet her, you're just blown away by her energy, but she also makes you feel so comfortable. And she's not afraid of having the hard conversations. And that's the kind of conversation I want us to have here. So Libby, thank you again. And I'm really excited to have this conversation. Maybe you can share a little bit about yourself as we kick things off.
Yeah, so I'm really thrilled to do this with you. And I think I just want to start by congratulating you on just this amazing next step in your career. I think it is so important to see women take their learnings and insights and apply them to helping other people and other women, especially, these days, I think advance in their career, right? And if you're the first woman in a room or the first woman in a leadership position, the most important thing that all of us can do is make sure that you're not the last, right? How are we promoting the next woman, person of color, right? Someone who looks much different, or may have such a different background or experience than the traditional sort of archetype of what we're used to in the business world or wherever else. So congratulations, and it's just so great to see your continued success.
Thank you so much. That's so
I am so excited to be here. There are lots of great participants. I'm just clicking to see because there's lots of people I know and friends, and obviously such a global audience. So you must be so proud to have so many great people. My name is Libby Leffler. And as Shivani mentioned, I'm the regional president of Northern California at Compass. We are a startup based in New York, and we're a real estate company, a real estate brokerage. I've spent my career before Compass in consumer technology, but really started my career in sales. So I began my career at Google. I started in online sales. I left Google and went to Facebook in 2008 and worked on Facebook's sales team. As Shivani mentioned, I was business lead to Facebook's chief operating officer, Sheryl Sandberg, which I've got a lean in poster behind me if you can see that. So I'm sure we'll get to talking a little bit about those experiences, which I think were, so impactful on my career, and later led a business development team at Facebook. Before I was at Compass, I led a business unit at SoFi, which is a fintech startup based in San Francisco. And now I'm at Compass working in the real estate industry. I would say that it's an interesting sort of continuation of the various things that I've done in my career, right? Starting in sales, pivoting into BD partnerships. And my family works in the real estate business. So, it's a really, I think, interesting merge and sort of confluence of these things that I grew up in this environment around my family, many of whom are realtors or real estate brokers. And I'm today able to bring together my experience in sales, in marketing, to this amazing organization. So that's what I've been up to. Obviously, we met when we were both getting MBAs at Harvard. I grew up in Northern California. I'm from Modesto, California, which is in the Central Valley, about 90 miles east of San Francisco. And I went to Cal for my undergrad. So I went to UC Berkeley. If there's any other Cal people in the chat, and if there are, I'm sure there will be some representation there.
Perfect. Welcome. As I said earlier, that's such an impressive career story. And, let's just dive right into and get real. I think when most people look at your impressive career resume, they probably think that you have it completely together. She's super confident. So I'm curious, do you ever feel like an imposter? And if so, how do you manage that self-doubt?
I think that everyone I know, almost everyone I know that is really driven and I think really ambitious, at some point in their life or their career has felt this way. And I think for me, certainly there's a dimension of, when you work in sales or when you work in partnerships or business development, right? You want to come and be really confident in the things you're talking about. And you want to share the things with people that will help them grow their businesses or that will help them, do whatever they're trying to do. I think for me, there's no question. There's always been this like lurking feeling of, of doubt, of self-doubt, and really what we know now to be impostor syndrome, right? Like always lurking in the background. And, I don't know quite why that is. I think that it's something that if you look at the data on it, right, it plagues people at all levels. Certainly, I think, more underrepresented groups, you could see imposter syndrome kind of emerging, especially for women. And it's just really common. I think it's a common thing that people don't talk about that often, because how do you talk about that with someone? Like, how do you say to someone, I feel like a fraud. I feel like people are going to, like, one day someone's going to bust in and say, oh, I figured you out, right? Like you're not, and so there's a dimension of this is it the thing that like motivates you? Is it the thing that like constantly keeps you striving for more? I think this is sort of, if you were to ask folks that we knew from business school, right, is this the like insecure overachiever thing? I think there's a little bit of that at play. But for me, the most important thing that has helped me be more confident, believe in myself, is really all about the people I surround myself with. And really being thoughtful in particular about where I get energy from, who I get energy from, and how those people help me in my path to like the next goal or the next thing I'm trying to achieve or the next group of people I'm trying to help. In my career, I've spent a lot of time with a lot of different people. And I think all of us can agree, no matter what career you're in, right? If you're around people often, the ones that give you really great energy. And then the folks where it might feel like energy is taken away or where you don't get energy. And I think for me, especially being in an industry that is centered on people, right? That is people driven. I need to be around people that give me energy, that give me confidence, that help amplify, the areas where I have the greatest strengths, right? Or where I shine and where I do my best. And so I've called this in the past, and we've talked about this before, like sort of developing your own mini board of directors. Like, what's your personal board of directors? If you think about what a board does, right? A board guides a company in a certain way, guides a CEO, represents potentially a group of investors, right? So they have this vested interest in you. And ideally, a board of directors for a company, right, that they know the executive team really well. They know the CEO, right? They've been brought on board for that reason. They understand the company. And so I think it's just critical to have this mini board of directors for yourself to be able to help amplify the stuff you're really great at and also lean on them for the stuff where you might not be as adept today, but the things that you can work on to be a better leader. And so I've really leaned on that, and have for the last few years.
That's I love that, just that mini board and surrounding yourself with people as you have those self doubts. I know for me, I like personally, it's just been a lot of like personal belief to pull myself out of that. But a lot of it's also been surrounding myself with people who are really qualified. And so when they say something, I'm like, yeah, okay, I guess they must know what they're talking about. I guess I'm actually qualified for the role I'm in. That plus like that internal belief, that knowing that you're actually qualified. And
Yeah.
I'd love to just talk a little bit more about this mini board. Can you share more around what does that look like for you and how do you use that to help you grow in your career?
Yeah, so I think you can comprise, and there's a bunch of folks in the chat talking about like personal board of directors. I think, someone says like a board of directors is key. I think the first thing is to really think about like what your needs are. So I think there's a baseline like foundation for who you would have on a personal board of directors. So I think about it like you have your sort of sponsor, right? That's the person who's going to make connections for you, make introductions for you, open doors. Someone who's more of a mentor, I really believe that like the best mentors can come from lateral relationships, people at your level, or even people that work on your team or that have worked for you before. I don't believe in like a traditional mentor relationship as it's always someone that you've worked for, or a skip level person, or even someone that you've asked like, hey, can you be my mentor? I think mentorship really comes from the experience and shared experience of real work together. And there's nothing quite like that. And it doesn't need to come from like an engraved invitation to be your mentor. It can just be someone that you learned a lot from. And for me, that's usually people that have worked in an organization that I led, or who have worked for me, that can give me a lot of insight for myself. I think you always have to have a cheerleader. So in those moments of real self-doubt, which we all have, right? Who is the person that is going to be there to help pump you up? Like there's that saying, right? Like, behind every great woman is like a hype squad on text, like a group text, like hyping her up. I really believe in this. I think you need to have people that you can turn to who are going to pump you up in those like key moments, whether it's before a big presentation, whether it's like you're going to do a fireside chat like this and you are nervous about it, and you really want to do well, and you talk to folks about it and they can help pump you up. So again, your sponsor, your mentor, sort of your hype squad or that cheerleader. I think you also want to have someone who's willing to tell you the brutal truth. And that may be someone that you lean on in key times, to give you a sense of, hey, I received this feedback, or hey, I think this is something that's going on. Have you witnessed this, or what should I do about it? And then someone who's a real problem solver. So I think a mentor often is someone who helps guide you in your career, right? Like, hey, I'm thinking about this career move, or I'm thinking about this position, or hey, I'm interested in board work. Like, how do I get into that? A sponsor is someone where you say, hey, look, I need help opening a door or an introduction here. I'm very interested in this. So there's differences between those two things. The problem solver is someone who you would call at the end of a day where you have a really difficult situation you're trying to work through. Could be personal, could be professional. Often those two bleed together, and can help you tactically work through both the strategy and like execution against that problem. And it may be that you're looking for this person to listen and just lend an ear. It may be that you're looking for solutions. But ideally, this is someone who has experience that will enable you to get real value from understanding, what they would do in that situation. And then, your fifth person, I think it's really helpful to have someone with some kind of domain expertise in the area that you work. So like I work in real estate. So for me, being around and surrounding myself with people who also work in this industry is really important, because the way that I would approach a problem or a situation in a different industry at a different point in time is probably much different than the way I would approach it in this industry. And I think surrounding yourself with like a domain expert or like an expert in your industry is the single most helpful way to really know that you're approaching it correctly. And you can sort of use that as a sounding board for what your domain expert problem solver has helped you with. So those are like 5 of the, just like the foundational boards of directors, sort of positions that I would think of. You don't need to formalize it. I think it's interesting to like write stuff down. I'm a planner, so I like to write things out, but you could think about for yourself, like, what are the things I need, right? What are your goals? There's people that come to me and often say, hey, you're really great at public speaking, or you seem really natural when you have these like fireside chat conversations. Like, how did you do that? And I would say, well, it was a lot of practice, getting uncomfortable, right? Pushing myself out of my comfort zone, standing up in a group, raising my hand first in a meeting. And that was not always the case for me at work. Like at work, I would tell you, if you were to sit in a meeting with me 10 years ago, I would not have been the person to ask a question in the room. I mean, Shivani knows me from an environment where, from an educational standpoint, we were in a program that requires you to sort of weigh in with your perspectives and opinions. I was definitely not one to shy away from weighing in with my perspective and opinion, but like 10 years ago, I would not have said a peep in a meeting. I would not have really asked a question. Why is that? I don't know why that is, but I worked with folks who were my mentors and problem solvers who gave me the advice of, you need to speak more in a meeting so much that it feels uncomfortable for you. You need to over rotate, because what feels uncomfortable for you is everyone else's normal. And now the feedback I get, and probably the feedback from you, Shivani, after talking with me on this session is, okay, we heard you, you need to listen more. And so again, it's these people who are willing to give you like the honest, who have enough compassion for you and really know you well enough to give you the honest feedback. And I think they can make all the difference.
I love how structured you broke everything down in terms of what you need to, like what your board should look like. I know so much of what you said right now really resonated with me. I was definitely feeling nervous before hopping onto this fireside chat. So I did have my squad texting me to hype me up. And I also used to be really shy and speaking in meetings, which people would not guess now. But yeah, 10 years ago, I used to write down my comment before I went into that meeting and just sit there until I was ready to say it and then be like, okay,
yeah,
I would participate now.
Yeah. So, I mean, in business school, I had, and I've never told anyone this, so this is like really, I'm putting it out there. Like I had a chart, and every time I spoke in a class, I would tick down that I spoke in that class. Did you do that too?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I felt like the conversation, I was very intimidated, I think, going in. And I felt like the conversation was so high level and folks had such interesting experiences. And my goal was just to figure out how to contribute. And so for me, these were like small steps where I could go, oh, that was a success. Like I talked in that class, right? So, they're in the Q&As, Carla says it's hard to get time with people and close friends are busy dealing with daily crises. Are there tribes out there who are committed to the cause of supporting one another? I think the most critical thing I would say about many boards is that this, to me, I don't frame it like, hey, let's get together every quarter. Let's get a coffee every Friday. I want your time. For me, it's one, mutual relationship. So they know they can call me. I know I can call them, right? That feeling is really like mutual. And often it might be opportunistic, right? It might be like, hey, I'm, looking at a board opportunity and I need your advice and guidance here. Rohit said in the chat, which I think is interesting, a sponsor from a different industry to open up doors. That's a great idea too, right? You want to have a domain expert, but hopefully one of those other 4 come from a different industry as well. I would agree that especially during these times, getting people to nail down time in a more formalized way is a really difficult proposition. So my recommendation is actually not necessarily to go that route. I think for someone like a mentor, you could write them an email update of like, hey, here's what I'm up to, here's what I'm doing, just wanted to stay in touch, check in on you. Whereas a sponsor is someone where it might be more transactional. The sponsor is someone where you have that relationship with the person. So calling them up and saying, hey, this thing came on my radar. I really need your help here. Do you think you could, make that introduction for me? Or here's how I'm thinking about it. That's a more natural connection with that person. But I agree. I mean, I think now is a very difficult time for all of us, right? To get time from people when we're in these uncertain environments. And so I think you just have to gauge it and be really thoughtful. Building a mini board isn't like we hop off of this session and you're like, okay, these are all the people on my mini board. This takes years potentially to compile. Like I think of people I know, women, colleagues of mine, folks who are in this chat that we bounce ideas off of each other and text with each other and talk about interviewing. I had a friend who was like interviewing this summer for new roles and she was contemplating, how do I negotiate this? Or can you get on the phone to talk with me about negotiating my job offer? Right? Shivani, a mutual friend of ours who recently took a new role and was like, here's all the things I need to think about. And I was like, well, have you thought about these things? Right? It may be more transactional and it's not overnight. So start with one person that you're thinking of and where you have those natural relationships and go from there.
I love that. And switching gears a bit, you became a new mom in April. So huge congratulations. That's really exciting. And as women, especially as working moms, we talk a lot about work-life balance. Pretty much any interview I go to with a woman leader, it's about how do you do work-life balance? But men never get asked that. So we're not going to talk about that here either. Let's talk about how becoming a mom was a growth opportunity in your career. How has it been an inflection point?
So I am a new mom. So, first I will say there are 0 people who've ever asked my husband if he is going to stay home with our baby. There are 0 people who ever asked my husband if he was going to leave his career to be like a full-time stay-at-home parent, or asked him how he would balance it. And, candidly, my husband works in the healthcare field. He's a physician. He also works in health tech. I mean, to me, as we're in the middle of a health crisis in the world and a pandemic, that actually seems like a very natural question for someone like him. So, it's no surprise to me that, I had folks asking me, how I would think about this in my career. And I hope that a lot of those questions were more driven by the uncertainty of the pandemic than sort of the unconscious bias that we have toward women staying home and caring for children. I became a new mom in April. There's a few things that surprised me on that journey. And balance is not one of them because I expected that the balance would be insane. So one, when I found out I was pregnant, I was very ill from probably 3 weeks, when I was like about 3 weeks pregnant to when I had my baby at 39 weeks. So that's a long time to really not feel well or like yourself. And the reason why I'm sharing that, and I think it's an important thing to share, is people go through health crises and problems and struggles and personal things. And I think empathy as leaders is like one of the most important traits, and it's not able to be taught. But it's so critical. I've always tried to be an empathic leader, to understand where people are coming from, to really listen to them on what they're going through. And these days when I hop on a meeting with my team, I always start with, or try to always start with, how are you? And then just stop and listen. Not how are you, like where people say, I'm great, or I'm busy, and then you move on, right? But really, how are you? I had a leader on my team this week who was talking about, we just moved my son to college and he's struggling, as he assimilates there, and it's in a different state, and we're a really close family, and, we're kind of struggling with that. And we talked about that. Or someone else who said, my childcare fell through and I don't know how I'm going to juggle all of these things. And so going through what I consider to be, a really tough time from a health standpoint. And to be clear, I'm healthy, my baby's healthy, we're great, we're okay. But, it was just a challenging time and a lonely time. I think that empathy is one of the most critical things. And emotional vulnerability and empathy are 2 things that I think I took out of that experience and becoming a parent, that are just invaluable for me as a leader. I think, the other things that come to mind are prioritization and efficiency. I think there is no one more efficient than a mom. And no offense, dads and other parents and caregivers. But I think like moms, and if there's moms on this session and, you know, moms in the chat, like shout out to you at this time in the world. Moms do it all. Moms are doing everything. And I think I never, like, you appreciate your parents, or you appreciate your mom for the things that your caregivers, your parents, whether you had, a traditional parents at home or a different, situation in your home life. You appreciate the people that help you along the way. I think becoming a mom helped me appreciate even more. Gosh, like moms do so much and take on so much. And I believe that becoming a parent can be this like wonderful inflection point in a career, because it gives you this moment to really consider, like, what am I passionate about? What is important to me? Right? If it's growing people and leading teams, like those are things that are really important to me. Driving businesses, scaling growth, really investing in others and giving back to others, and helps you really prioritize how you do that both at home and at work. There's no question that during the global pandemic, we are facing like a real crisis at this moment in time, especially for the women leaders in the world. If you read, McKinsey came out with a study 2 weeks ago. The study, if you haven't seen it, it's leanin.org and McKinsey, and they talk about the number of women these days that are thinking of leaving the workforce. 1 in 4 women is literally contemplating leaving because of all of the demands on time. And it's more important than ever that our leaders and companies really understand this, because it could set us back in such significant ways. Like all of the strides that we have made in the past 6, 7, 8 years, in terms of women's leadership, women of color, people of color, creating more diverse and inclusive environments in our workplaces. This moment in time has the potential to really set us back. So I think all of us as leaders, like if you're tuning into this session, you are someone who cares about this. And this is an issue that I think we can't ignore. I don't want to be negative, but I do think it's so critical that we are aware of the stark reality of the world that we're living in today.
I think that's so important that you call that out. I agree. I think it's like all the parents, especially the moms, who are balancing so much around this. Because studies also show that moms end up taking more of the household and just kind of all the work that's required around it. So thank you for raising this. As we have leaders or people who have moms on their teams or working parents, caregivers, is there like one thing that they could start thinking about how they could support, even if they're not necessarily in that leadership role?
Yeah, again, I think it's this question of how are you? I think it's really asking people how they are and taking the time to listen, checking in on people. This is a moment where each of us has the opportunity to step up and figure out how we can help give more support to others. And, I just think there's no moment more important than this one to really figure out how you can support the people around you and how you can best connect with the people around you. The other thing is to really understand, like, if you're at a company, what your company's policies are, and, help shape, if you can, like those companies' policies to be more flexible for working parents, working moms in particular. And we talk about balance. And I think I've got potentially my husband at the door trying to get his laptop. Mike. So this is a real,
this is perfect.
Like
perfect
real thing. So this is balance. So I've got his laptop here and I'm doing this webinar and I'm going to give this to him. So 1 second.
We couldn't have planned this better. This is great. And as you're listening in, if you have more questions, put it into the Q&A that's at the bottom right of your Zoom screen, and you can upvote questions that you want us to prioritize.
Perfect.
In that Q&A.
You guys, it's just all about balance. You have to figure it out. We share office space. So, it might even mean getting up in the middle of Shivani's wonderfully produced session to hand someone a laptop.
That was great.
It's the little things these days. It's the little things. I want to read what people are saying in the chat. What is the one thing I think leaders can do tomorrow to help prevent female leaders? I really believe in flexibility in the workplace for people who are especially for caretaking children. So I'll tell you a story I heard in the last week that was disappointing, but I think was a great example of how a woman leader handled a situation with another woman executive. I had someone very close to me. She's the president of a part of an organization, really ambitious woman, has 2 young children under the age of 5. And a client called her, and it was like, I think late into the evening, relatively speaking, for, if you have young children, and had sort of a very time sensitive issue. So the woman picked up the phone, managed the issue with that client, and got off the phone. And the woman's 2 children were in the background because it was, it was like later than dinner time, right? Probably right before bedtime. So the next day, the woman's boss called her in and said, "Hey, that client called me today. And mentioned a couple things, and I wanted to talk to you about it." And so the woman was like, "Okay, yeah, we worked through it, and here's we got to resolution, and it all worked out well." And the person's boss said, "No, the person called me because they wanted to say that you had answered the phone to deal with their issue, and that they could hear your 2 children in the background, and that it was unprofessional." And we're talking in the middle of a global pandemic where we've got parents juggling all kinds of things, all kinds of work schedules. And this is like, you're talking like later into the evening, it's someone's family time. They chose to answer because it was a time sensitive issue, resolved it immediately. And sure, right, if you have children in the background, ideally, they're quiet. I have a young infant. It's usually the moments that, you need a little bit of quiet, that you don't have the quiet. So it's unpredictable and it's unmanageable. And I would have thought that the client would have called that person's boss and said, "Hey, kudos to this person. Thanks to them, I got this issue resolved. And by the way, she's managing a lot right now, whatever." And the person's boss basically said, when the person said that, her kids were in the background, she said, "Okay." And she said, "Well, I think that that's unprofessional." And I guess the client said that, and the person's boss obviously stood up for them and wanted to mention to them, "Hey, heads up, I'm going to be dealing with this person going forward, but I just wanted to commend you for like even taking the time to get on with this client to resolve the issue so quickly. And I don't want you to think twice about it." I think at this moment, we've got to have a little bit more perspective for what is going on in people's lives. And people are dealing, they're caretaking family members. They are trying to stay safe. People are afraid. They're trying to stay healthy. And this is a moment where we can really step up as leaders. I think the thing that we can do tomorrow is, 1, support the leaders on our team, especially your women leaders. People of color have a disproportionately more challenging time advancing in the workforce, getting opportunities. The data are really clear on this. So really be thoughtful also about the situations that people are dealing with individually. And I think flexibility is key. Help people in the work that they are doing. People have doctor's appointments, right? We're all working around this like COVID world of, only one parent can take a child to the pediatrician. If your kid is sick, they have to do this. We only are open from abbreviated hours from, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. We need to be aware that these things are going on and be comfortable giving people the ability to manage their lives in addition to managing our businesses. I think it's more important than ever.
Yeah. I think Larissa captures my emotions really well right now. That just fired me up, not in a great way, is how she captured it. It's great to hear just how your friend handled it and how her boss handled it. And hopefully as we have more of these conversations, that becomes more of the norm and acceptable, because, just given the current circumstances, even if we weren't in these circumstances, just understanding the situation around it. And I want to continue with this theme around having these real and honest conversations. I want to talk about failures. Yeah. I think often, we talk a lot about successes, but we don't talk about the failures. And in reality, pretty much every single success has many failures behind it. So can you share with us a failure that you've had in your career, and what have you learned from it?
Yeah, I've had a lot of failures in my career. I think the failures are more interesting than any of the like successes. I think for a long time, I looked at my career as very aligned with the traditional career ladder, that you always need to be moving up. And I think that was, first of all, like a total failure in my ability to think more creatively about what my career could hold. Um, I spoke with someone after I left Facebook, who was an executive at Facebook, and we sat down. He had left Facebook as well, and we talked about sort of my next steps and talked about, there's a lot of people asking in the chat, by the way, about HBS, and we can talk a little bit. Maybe we can take like a question on MBA experience and HBS, and we probably can both weigh in on it. But, I was like, oh, I'm thinking about like going to business school and doing this. And he was like, you think about your career and life like checking boxes. And he was like, you're kind of a box checker, and you're just trying to kind of go through and do all the things that you think you should do. And really, you should sit down and spend more time thinking about what excites you, what you're passionate about, what you're really good at. And I thought that was very direct feedback, but it did bring to light like sort of a failure of mine, which is thinking about the world in a very, very black and white way, that there's like one path or another. You go here or you go there. You make this decision or that decision. Careers are like, they go all over the place. I mean, it's cliche to say it now, but Facebook talked about this very early on, like the folks who ran culture and people and talent at Facebook, the careers are jungle gyms, and they are, right? There were times that like I didn't raise my hand for a new leadership position because I was like, oh, I don't want to like, I don't want to leave the country. I'm scared to do that. I don't know about that. I don't know what life would be like living, internationally. There were times I knee jerked and had like more emotional reactions to things. I probably should have taken some time to cool down and like think through something a little bit more analytically. And I think that's a maturity thing. And we all have, things to work on. I think maturity is like one of the most important traits that as a leader that you can have in being able to really view situations objectively and not be, so hyper in tune with how it makes you feel in the moment, but really think through all of the various steps. So, I think there have been times where I sat back and didn't use my voice and didn't necessarily feel empowered to stand up for the team or raise important feedback. And I consider all of those things to be failures. But, I think in our career, the most interesting things that help teach us and push us and help us grow and challenge us are those failures. Like the successes and the things where you like, go to business school or you do all this. Like, I don't consider that to be a success. I consider that to be just like part of my journey. And so I really relish in those times. I think the failures can be hard and can take us through very emotional moments in our journey, but you have to be willing to like endure them and be all in on them. Like if you look, it's lean in, like lean into that. Lean into that, right? Don't lean into all the stuff that's gone well or where you got the promotion, or like take a moment to celebrate, woohoo, and then like back to work. Onward. And we have so much more like growth to be had. I think the other thing is, and a failure of mine before I ever had a mini board of directors was not feeling comfortable enough to confide in people and like the deep down feelings that I was having about my career, like not feeling like I could talk to people about imposter syndrome, not feeling like because I believed that no one else had this feeling. And actually, when you put it out there and give things like sunlight and put things out in the, out in the open, you realize that like all the things you're dealing with, lots of people are dealing with. And if they're not, they may know someone who is, or they may be a great listener, or they might have great advice for you. So failure, I think, is also feeling like it's only you going through something. Find someone that you can share with, that you can talk to, because I guarantee you there are people who have some analog in their life for whatever the situation is that you're going through. And if they don't, they might be just a great listener.
I love that. I can definitely relate to that. I think failures have influenced my career so much. I was also a box checker. And once I kind of took a step away from that and also reflect my failures, like I would not have started Ascend if I hadn't made so many mistakes in my career. And I just realized like, we should just learn from my mistakes, your mistakes, and so many other women who have succeeded, and to learn from it. And I agree with you. When we put it on the open, so often we find that other people are feeling the same way as us. And thank you so much for sharing, not only just on this topic, but as you talked about becoming a mom or just kind
Yeah,
of growing through your career.
of course.
That has been like, that's so powerful just to hear how you're feeling like it. And, as I know we want to take a question around business school, and then maybe we can transition back into leadership to wrap it up. So do you want to share a little bit how HBS has shaped your career for you or how it's helped you grow?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of questions about like how HBS helps and contributes differently. Um, my core, like fundamental sort of belief about business school is it's really about the people. Like, I think it's about the people, the professors, the dialogue, the conversation. Like if you're looking for core skills, I don't think you like go to business school to learn leadership. You don't learn leadership in a classroom. You learn it by interacting with other people, spending as much time as you can with other people. You don't learn it from a book. Like there's a million leadership books here. Like if we gauge leadership based on the number of books that people read or like have in their house, I would be the most prolific leader ever. That's not, we're learning every day, and learning means learning with other people and from other people. So I found that experience helped me in my career, again, build confidence in engaging in dialogue openly, sharing and crafting points of view, opinions, taking a more quantitative, I think, approach and perspective when weighing in on business challenges. And then I think the network is really interesting, but you can develop a network anywhere. I believe that the world is going to fundamentally change in terms of how people view higher education, like broadly. I think we're already going through some of that shift now, but I think with the pandemic, with people engaging in, educational pursuits virtually, I think that will change even more in the next 5 to 10 years. So, by all means, like, people are asking like, what are the things you learned at HBS that you can only learn at HBS? I think it's not so much about learning something that's specific to HBS. I think it's more, do you believe that the network is a worthwhile investment for you? And for me, having grown up in Northern California, having spent my career, working within a 90-mile radius of where I grew up, I felt that it was this interesting global exposure to people that I would otherwise probably never cross paths with. And those are the people, by the way, on my mini board that are my sounding boards for things that are going on in their industries or with their, the challenges that they deal with every day that are most insightful to me. Because the folks that I work with, I can talk to and connect with and chat with them about what's going on, or peers in my industry. But I'm really looking for what are the more global, more diverse, more, broad backgrounds that can help me build a more robust group of people who can help me navigate this crazy journey of career.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's about the people. I also am from the Bay Area, and yeah, business school gave me an opportunity to meet people that I normally wouldn't meet. And I think that was really valuable around it. And I now, coming out of it, even 4 years later, I still have a book club of HBS women that I meet with on a monthly basis, and we get to have real conversations. We read the books, sometimes we discuss it, but primarily it's just having these real conversations. And I think on the learning part, I have learned most of my leadership lessons from on the job. You get some insights doing the case studies, but I think primarily on the job. And that is also what inspired me to start the leadership program, because I was like, there is no place where we can have these real conversations, where we can talk about how do you respond to dominant personalities? How do you get buy-in? How do you storytell? And so I think it's everyone is a personal decision about whether or not business school makes sense for you. I agree with you, Libby. I think online education, higher education is going to change over the coming years. And for us, I think it was really around the people that drove us there.
And it's also, the other thing to mention is it's really expensive. Like, yeah, it's a really costly and expensive thing to do, no matter, what your situation is. And I think you have to really think through like the leadership stuff. If you're really focused on leadership, a lot of that stuff is learned on the job. It's learned by managing people. It's learned by spending more time with people. It's learned by digging in. One of the things I read and saw in the last couple of weeks, and I had some friends share with me, is there was a woman, and I am regretful that I forget who said this, but someone recently said, in a career, one of the most important and powerful things that I did was remind myself to be patient. Why am I in such a hurry? And that is something I think among my peers and my network and people I know, it's like, we're all in a hurry. right? It's this idea of, okay, well, I went to go work in consulting and then I haven't worked in consulting. So for those who are consultants, I may be getting this totally wrong. So just bear with me, but it's like, okay, after 2 years, I become an associate and then I'm an analyst and I know I'm getting the thing wrong, but it's like, and then after 1 year, I do this. And then if I don't do that after 18 months, then I go and pivot and do this. Live your own journey, live your own path. There are no right paths. Don't look at my path and go, I want to be, her, I want to be her path. It's like, you don't want to be my path. My path is my path. Like that's what I've done. And it's not here nor there. It's just the path that I've been on. On this path, there are twists and turns. There have been ups and downs and really low lows. There have been personal things that have happened, family struggles that I've gone through, relationship struggles and challenges that, we're not here to talk about that, but we all have these things. It's not all like you read people's bios and you read this stuff and it's like, someone in the Q&A said, oh, well, you had this like really successful career before business school. It's like, well, did I? Like, I don't know. What defines a really successful career? Like, to me, a successful career is like the most successful career you can have to me is you feel like you've made an impact on people's lives in a positive way, that you can go to sleep at night feeling like, okay, I did something great today that really mattered to people, and wake up in the morning and feel like, gosh, I'm so excited to get up every day and do this. And this, don't look at other people's map and want that to be yours. Look at your journey and make that your journey, right? And I think for me, that's one of the things always in my career that I did intuitively that I didn't know I did, and later got some advice from a great mentor and a professor, zig where everyone else is zagging.
That's so good. I love that.
Think about what that really means. Like, it's like, have the courage inside to do what works for you, right? To do what works for you, to do the things that you think are like a great next step for you, or take on that new challenge, or like raise your hand for a promotion and like, fine, you may not get it. And that's okay, because you learned something in that, get some feedback from someone, build a skill. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Right? I think it's said really best in the chat. Someone's said, everybody's TK says everybody's blueprint is different. And it's true. We all have different circumstances and we all have different things. And like, we're all human. We're all just here to like do the very best we can. So give yourselves grace. Like, there have been so many times in my life, and truthfully, I get emotional thinking about it. Like, there have been so many times when I just never gave myself grace. And a mentor of mine, who's a really good friend and someone I worked for, for years, said to me a few years ago, you're just too hard on yourself. Just be kind to yourself. And that's like a reminder from someone on my mini board, right? Who's also a friend and a mentor by proxy of working together. That is such powerful advice and rare advice to get from a really successful leader and executive, which is just be kind to yourself, right? Don't always hold yourself up to like the next great thing you need to be doing, or the next like person who's doing something better than you. Everyone has their own circumstances. And in this moment in the world, there's nothing more and better that we can do for ourselves than give ourselves just a little grace, because this is unlike anything else. And if you're here and watching this, I am so proud of you, because taking time out of your day, or like your lunch, like this is when I have lunch, and, taking time out of your day to come here, to learn something, to talk with people, to ask a question is really powerful. Like, you're using this time to do something to improve yourself and improve your life. And that's like the first step to amazing success. So if you're even here, like, I'm so proud of you. And I think we all need to hear that these days, because it's kind of we're in tough times, but we're in it together.
That was really beautifully said. I love just how open and honest you were on that, and just calling out like we all have our own path. I know I definitely often feel like I'm falling behind. But then I have to like check myself. I'm like, who am I comparing myself to? And it's realizing that often it's just this black hole that I feel like I'm falling behind. But then when I actually check myself, like, there's no comparison. We each, like you said, carve our own way around it. And, as we wrap up, is there like You shared so many words of wisdom. Is there one last piece of career advice that you'd want to leave with the group as people think about moving into leadership?
I think I would reiterate to be patient. Be patient. Like, these things take time. Great careers are not built overnight, right? If you're holding yourself up, against people that like founded some insane like internet company at the age of, 19 and dropped out of, wherever. And there are a few of those folks in the world, that's an amazing story. Those are amazing, like super inspiring stories. The majority of entrepreneurs start businesses later, right? Like I haven't started a business. So, but like, I think maybe one day in the future, that could be part of my career path. I move really fast. If you know me and there's a bunch of people in this chat who know me or who are watching who know me, like I move really fast. If you like send me an email, if you ask me to do something, like I do it really quickly. Being a parent, being a leader, right, means more patience, more grace for ourselves. The other thing I think is really important is always planning, like have intentionality. Don't just let your career kind of like unfold for itself, and don't plan to like the ends of the earth to where you're like, like it has to be this, right? Like you can be spontaneous, you can listen to your gut, but like I think having some sense of what am I really good at? What gives me energy? And building out, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was from, a former boss and mentor and friend of mine, Sheryl Sandberg, who said, what is your short run goal and what is your long run dream? And everything else kind of in between those does fall into place if you have that short run, like 18-month objective and the long run dream, like 10 years out. Instead of planning, okay, and then at 4 years, I'm going to do this, at 5 years, I'm going to do this, or whatever, like it's not possible. It's not possible to plan all those things in between. And you can change those things, but I think that patience and that thoughtful planning within reason can be, really great ways to sort of shape up a career. One thing someone asked in the Q&A, which I actually don't even know what books are behind me, but someone said, if you had to pick in 5 seconds any book behind you, which would it be and why? It could be any book. So I thought I would challenge myself to pick a book that's behind me, just because I thought that was a really interesting question from an anonymous person. So, and I can't do it in 5 seconds, but I'll pick a book that's probably up here somewhere that I just can't see right now, which is Lean In. Because it's a great book. It's really data driven. And I think it's something, encouraging and inspiring advice that applies to every single person, to be your biggest fan, to believe in yourself and to invest in yourself.
Yeah, I love this. So many great takeaways. And, for the group, we've talked about imposter syndrome. We've talked about our mini boards, failures, how becoming a mom helps us grow, not sticking to our own pattern. I'd love to hear, what is your one key takeaway from here? I'm sure you have many. So one, put it in the chat and just would love to read those. Put in the chat, what's your one key takeaway?
I love all the chats because people have so many great things to say here.
Yeah, practicing about patience around career growth, the mini board, giving yourself grace. So grace is a big one around just kind of not feeling like you have to stick to one career path. I love this. So many great takeaways.
What's interesting is like also when you talk to people in different industries, like I mentioned my husband who's in healthcare, he went through like this really long career journey of medical school and then like doing residency and all this stuff that I know nothing about because it was never like, I just don't know anything about that. Well, now I do, but I didn't then. And someone wrote like, I'm still paying off my undergrad. And like, I worked at SoFi where we focused on, SoFi invented student loan refinancing. And like, there were people, dentists, specialized physicians, et cetera, that had, unbelievable student loan debt that they were paying off. And, my husband being a physician, is also in that position. And I think for him, like, it's interesting. This is why I think it's so important to talk to people. And in the virtual world, it's like, get out there, do stuff like this, get in the chat, talk to folks, connect on LinkedIn, whatever it might be. I've learned so much from him because he's in such a different field about like all of the sort of pitfalls of like comparing yourselves to others and feeling like you have to follow this path, or like you're so deep in it, you have to follow the path. And you can do whatever you want in your life. We all have constraints, right? There's financial constraints. There's like things where we have to be responsible and engage in a different way. But I think, as long as you're being true to yourself, figure out how to zig, create your own path. Like, there's so much time. Hopefully we are blessed as individuals with the time to be able to be patient with our journey. And I think we each owe it to ourselves to really be thoughtful about who is it that we want to be. When I left undergrad, people were going to work in ABC, accounting, banking, and consulting. I didn't feel like I fit into any of those. I really didn't. I didn't think I fit in. And so I went to go work at Google, which was like a great place to work. And one day, maybe in the future, as Ascend continues to ascend into, we can, ascend into domination on helping women and people get into positions of leadership and advocate for themselves. We could get back together and talk about that, because that's a whole other kind of where I started. That's a whole other thing.
I would love that. Libby, thank you so much for joining us, and everyone, thanks all for like the great comments in the chat, all the great questions. I love all these takeaways. If you want to continue to have more conversations around this, and if you want to develop these skills that we talked about around feeling more confident and getting buy-in, then I definitely recommend checking out Ascend's leadership program. You can apply. We have a program starting up in November, and we have a few seats left. And Libby, thank you again. This was really one of our best conversations, and I just loved your candor. And so it was a true honor just to have you with us.
Of course. Thanks, Shivani. Thanks, everyone. It's so nice to be able to connect with you. Feel free to reach out to me. I put my LinkedIn URL there if you want to stay connected. So thanks, everyone.
Perfect. Bye, everyone. Stay well. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Bye.